Welcome to the Render Loop. Today, we're digging into the absolutely wild story of OpenAI. I mean, this is a company that started with a super noble mission, literally, to save humanity from AI. And somehow, it morphed into one of the most controversial, cash-hungry, and powerful corporations on the entire planet. So let's break down exactly how that happened.
Right, so how on earth did this happen? Seriously, this is the big question we're going to unpack today. It is an absolutely nuts journey from, this pure, almost utopian idealism to this super messy reality of hypergrowth, massive profits, and, getting the federal government knocking on your door.
All right, let's rewind to the beginning. The story here doesn't start with a business plan or a pitch deck. Nope, it starts with a huge philosophical mission. The goal was never to build a product, but to create a safe, artificial general intelligence that would, in theory, serve all of humanity.
So, this really gets to the heart of what they were trying to do at first. Back in 2015, you had these tech heavyweights, Sam Altman, Elon Musk. They all get together and set up OpenAI as a non-profit. The entire point was to protect the development of AGI, that's artificial general intelligence, basically AI that can learn pretty much any task a person can, from the one thing they thought would corrupt it, the need to make a profit.
And this right here, this quote, it gets to the absolute core fear that was driving all of this. These founders, they genuinely believed that AGI could be incredibly dangerous if the wrong people got a hold of it. So what was their solution? It was pretty radical. Let's build it first, let's do it out in the open, and then we'll give the benefits away to everybody. The whole idea was to make sure no single company could ever monopolize this incredible power.
But you know how these things go. This beautiful, utopian dream very quickly slammed head-on into a harsh and, an unbelievably expensive reality.
And believe it or not, it all came down to this one number. The team figured out that the sheer amount of computing power they needed to make any real progress, it was doubling every 3.4 months. I mean, think about that. That's not just expensive, it's a completely insane exponential curve. It's like trying to outrun a rocket ship on a bicycle. There's just no nonprofit on Earth that could possibly afford to keep up.
So boom, they hit a brick wall, hard. Just to continue their research, heck, just to keep the lights on at the scale they were operating, they needed access to billions, with a B. And here's the crazy irony. The nonprofit model, the very thing they created to protect the mission, was now the thing holding it back. Something had to give. A radical change was the only way forward.
And pivot they did. They came up with this really unique, kind of weird hybrid structure, a capped profit company. Okay, so the idea was to attract huge investment. We're talking about the eventual $10 billion from Microsoft. But, and this is the key part, the original nonprofit board would still be in charge, still calling the shots. It was a compromise, right? They were trying to get the best of both worlds. But what it really did was create this permanent tension, like bolting a for-profit jet engine onto the side of a nonprofit sailboat.
And you know what? It worked. Oh boy, did it work. With the floodgates of capital suddenly thrown wide open, the pace of innovation just went into absolute overdrive.
Just look at this timeline. It shows you the result in no uncertain terms. I want you to look at the explosion in the size of their models, which we measure in parameters. Think of them like the model's brain cells. We go from 117 million in 2018 to a mind-blowing 175 times billion just 2 years later with GPT-3. That new funding model wasn't just helping, it was pure rocket fuel for this growth.
And then came the products that you and I can actually use. When they released tools like ChatGPT to the public, all that academic research suddenly turned into a commercial goldmine. And I mean, the company's revenue didn't just grow, it absolutely skyrocketed. They're on pace to jump from $4 billion to $13 billion in just over a single year. That's insane.
But, of course, this kind of rapid-fire commercial rollout of a technology that, remember, OpenAI itself had warned could be dangerous, well, that didn't go unnoticed. And it wasn't long before the regulators came knocking.
So in March of 2023, this group called the Center for AI and Digital Policy went and filed a formal complaint with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. They basically argued that OpenAI was putting out products that were biased, deceptive, and a real risk to our privacy and public safety. And they said this directly violated the FTC's own rules about AI.
And sure enough, by July, the FTC had launched a full-blown formal investigation. They sent this massive letter demanding information on everything. They wanted to know about bias in the AI models, about privacy and how they use our data, about public safety risks, and really, whether the company was just straight up deceiving people about what its products could do and what the dangers were. Suddenly, that utopian dream, it was now Exhibit A in a federal case.
Okay, but to really understand this rocket ship, we've got to look at the engine. And what's powering it is, well, it's cash. Behind the scenes, OpenAI is burning through money at a rate that is honestly almost impossible to wrap your head around. Just to stay alive, OpenAI is basically living on this insane capital treadmill. First, they raise a historic amount of money, like, say, a $40 billion funding round. Then, they immediately forecast spending $28 billion of that in 2025 alone, which means even with all that revenue pouring in, they're still projected to lose over $14 billion for the year. They have to keep running just to stand still. And, get ready for this number, $320 billion. Let that sink in. That's the estimated amount OpenAI thinks it's going to spend just on computing power between 2025 and 2030. It's an astronomical figure. It just shows you the unbelievable cost of playing the game at this level.
And this chart here just lays out the core financial problem perfectly. Look, in 2025, they're expected to pull in almost $13 billion in revenue. That's amazing, a huge achievement. But their expenses are projected to be more than double that, at $28 billion. So in this bizarre model, the faster they grow, the more money they actually lose. It's completely counterintuitive. So the business model, right now, completely depends on their ability to raise tens of billions of dollars every single year just to keep the lights on. And that is a lot of smart people asking a very simple question. Is this a sustainable strategy, or is it a ticking financial time bomb?
Now, of course, OpenAI isn't doing all of this in a vacuum. The reason for all this insane spending is pretty simple, actually. They are locked in a super high-stakes global technology arms race. And just look at the players on the field. The competition is absolutely fierce. You've got Microsoft, who's both their biggest partner and a huge competitor, using its massive Azure platform. You've got Google, with basically bottomless pockets and its huge advantage with search and all its workspace products. And then you have Meta, who's trying to flip the whole board over by pushing their open source models.
And that pressure, that intense competition, is what drives everything else we've talked about. It's why they have to raise and burn through billions. It's why they feel the pressure to push products out the door so fast, maybe even before all the safety checks are done. Because in this race, if you fall behind for even a second, you might as well be irrelevant.
Which brings us back to the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is this OpenAI playbook, this radical pivot from a research lab to a cash-burning for-profit giant, is this just what it takes to build the future? Or is it all just a wildly ambitious multi-billion-dollar house of cards built on a fantasy of infinite money that just can't last forever? The final chapter of this story is definitely still being written. If you want more technical breakdowns of YouTube, Reels, TikTok, and the business of media, subscribe to The Render Loop. We've got new videos every week.